This is the thing that I had struggled with for so long and pretended like I didn't have the willpower, I wasn't good enough, what's wrong with me? In middle school, really started to look at like how I looked, and because of the bullying, went on all sorts of weird diets, cabbage soup diet, fat-free cottage cheese, and saltines at one point. I was dieting on such low calories that trying to do homework just seemed really tough. I just remember staring at the same paragraph over and over, and things weren't happening. The amount of appetite drive from my brain has just been so strong for so long. When I finally decided to give Wegovy a shot, it was a life-changing experience for me. Now I can show up and I can be my best self at work. I can be my best self as a spouse and as a friend, because now this hunger thing has been removed.
Welcome back to the Checkup podcast. These days, so many are quick to overemphasize the side effects of taking GLP-1 medications. You hear all sorts of derogatory terms thrown around, Ozempic butt, Ozempic face. But like with any medical treatment, we need to discuss the benefits as well as the harms. And sometimes those benefits can absolutely be dramatic. Today, I'll be speaking with Dr. Christle Guevarra, a board-certified family and sports medicine physician who actually serves as the traveling team physician for U.S. figure skating. She opens up about how uncontrollable food noise absolutely wrecked her health, her relationships, and even her ability to perform well in school. I very much appreciate her honesty about the difficulties along the way, including making the decision to start a GLP-1 medication. I think it's more important than ever to share stories highlighting how for some, these medications can absolutely be a life changer. Huge thanks to Cozy Earth for sponsoring this video. You've become very passionate in advocacy and discussion covering GLP-1 medications, Ozempic, Wegovy, tirzepatide, all of these ones that potentially patients can take. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, not sure where you want to begin.
You're guiding the horse or the carriage, I guess.
I guess I've just struggled for so long. I've failed so many medications, and I've worked with I have a doctor that, has recommended all sorts of weight management medications in the past. And, when I finally decided to give, Wegovy a shot, no pun intended, in January of 2022, it was a life-changing experience for me. And it really I just found myself thinking, one, why did I say no 2 years ago when my doctor first recommended it to me? And why now? Like, why couldn't this have come sooner? Because this is the thing that I had struggled with for so long, for so many years, and pretended like I didn't have the willpower, I wasn't good enough, what's wrong with me, why am I broken? If I could trade my, intellect and my, scholastic achievements for this type of peace, I would 100%, I don't know, I would 100% probably do it, just because the amount of appetite drive from my brain has just been so strong for so long. And so, yes, I am completely biased because I have struggled with this my entire life. But man, these medications for a lot of people can be very life-changing. And I just want people to understand that we're not broken. It's not a willpower problem. There is something going on in the brain that is just incredibly powerful, and some of us just need a little bit of help.
What was your journey like before the medication came on board? Because you mentioned you've had all these struggles.
Yeah, I grew up I always knew I had a much higher appetite than my peers. I had a girl who lived next door to me. I moved to the neighborhood when I was 2, And I noticed she was, maybe about 20 pounds lighter than me. We were about the same height. And her mom noticed that like I had a much higher appetite. So the clean plate club of the 80s. So she would always invite me over and just comment on how, Christle, look at Christle. She's such a, perfect person because she eats everything on there, the fruit, the vegetable, the dessert, the main course.
Well, that's how they shared love. So.
Right. And they did. I love it. But I also just knew that, I could definitely scarf down that plate, and I probably could have eaten a little bit more on top of that. I remember getting, kind of bullied in school. Got teased, I fought back, and got in trouble, for saying not so nice things. But I always played sports.
What were they bullying you about?
One kid called me fat, was making fun of me for being fat. And then I fired back and started making fun of his, learning disability. And the teacher pulled me out of class, and I got in trouble because it was not a nice thing to say. But, very early on, people would tease me. But I was still active. I still played sports. I did volleyball, basketball, whatever my, elementary school could offer, but just always found myself always digging for, snacks in the kitchen, rummaging in there. My mom, she did her best. She, would say stuff to me to, make sure you don't overeat, junk food, but it's clearly tasty and it tastes really good. Mm-hmm. In middle school, really started to look at like how I looked, and because of the bullying, went on all sorts of weird diets, cabbage soup diet, ate fat-free cottage cheese and saltines at one point. And I would do a lot of cardio VHS tapes that my mom had just to kind of get in shape. And it worked briefly. And then puberty sort of hit, and I just put on a whole bunch of weight.
What was driving you to attempt all this weight loss? Were you health conscious that early, or was the bullying having impact?
The bullying was having a lot of impact, but also I also wanted to not be chubby. I didn't want to look like that. And I know that's, it's taken me a lot of really thinking about things like, is it society or is it somebody else kind of pressuring me to make these changes? But I didn't want to look that way. I vividly remember at one point, because I went to a Catholic elementary school, praying that like, if we could just, hello, dear God, are you there? It's me, Margaret. Like, if I could just trade this to be a little bit thinner, I would just, trade all my straight A's, because I had that in the back pocket. Like, yes, I can't look this way, but I do well in school. I get straight A's. My grandmother loves me. She pays me for my report card every time I show up. So like, that's where I got my attention from, is being the smart kind of chunky kid, in school. And so, lost a little bit of weight here and there, but it was always a struggle. Always felt hungry all the time. And then high school kind of rolled around, and, I think it was less, people weren't really making fun of me for my weight, but I was still very self-conscious about it. I remember just kind of taking whatever over-the-counter like supplement I could take that didn't require, an ID or an age restriction, none of which worked. The cabbage soup diet, at one point I remember buying Vivarin, the caffeine tablets, to kind of help stave off hunger. Didn't quite work. And
Did you notice any negative impact of any of those interventions?
Not at the time.
Okay.
Not at the time. So, I mean, right now I feel pretty okay. So,
right, okay.
It didn't do anything. I didn't feel anything. It was probably just a waste of my, allowance money at best, knock on wood.
Yeah, classic supplements.
Yeah. Right. All right. And I just also remember really struggling in school now with the dieting, because I was dieting on such low calories that like trying to do homework just seemed really tough. Trying to do chemistry homework. And I just remember staring at the same paragraph over and over and just not really thinking, like, just things weren't happening. So if I could go back and tell myself, maybe not a huge calorie deficit, but.
Where were you getting your nutrition knowledge at the time from? Like, where was your awareness of what a calorie was? Where was that coming from?
Man, I don't even know if I was aware of true calories back then. I remember a lot of it came from magazines about, before the internet existed. That's where I got sort of my workout, Shape magazine was a huge one that I would always buy, because there was always these inspiring stories of women who lost weight. Here's how I did it. And there was a book, and I was trying to actually buy it at some point, like the Clinic 30 program that was written by a physician and his I think his wife, who is an RD, that gave me a concept of like portion control, but not necessarily calories. And so, I would try to, eat less snack foods and try and cook more. So there was a time where I tried to, do a little bit of that. And I don't know why I just decided to put that away and do these other things. So there wasn't like, it's not like the landscape that it is now, where you have, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube to.
Well, now you probably have more information than you know what to do with, especially because there's so many tribalistic camps of you only have to follow this or you have to follow that. And I feel like that becomes equally as confusing, where back then you had one source of misinformation from Shape magazine.
Right. Exactly.
I remember reading some like cigarette and champagne diet of like early days of Vogue. I don't know if you're familiar with that kind of stuff, but just the ridiculousness that we found in those magazines. I mean, I too read the Men's Health, Men's Fitness, where I would try and get a chest routine from. And at least that was a bit more benign, because it's a chest routine at the end of the day. If you're moving around, you're exercising, it almost doesn't matter what you're doing as long as you're safe.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine how hard that must have been for you in hearing how difficult it was to read questions, to be focused in school, and then you went so far in your academic journey. How were you able to manage going to medical school, learning science, while struggling so much with what the outside world was saying about your weight, but also how you felt internally about the weight?
Oh, yeah. That's because I did a complete 180 in undergrad and decided I did not want to be, I did not want to be a C student anymore, because my grades had tanked in high school, barely skated by in high school. And I made my way to college, and I got my first C+ in general chemistry. And I said, that's it. I'm done. I'm going to do whatever it takes to, be at the top academically. And so with that, given what happened in high school, I kind of went all in, made some not so great choices, and just, whatever I wanted to eat, I ate. I ate pretty much an entire day's worth of like very processed, high calorie dense foods. Ate when I was hungry, when I was not hungry, when I was just bored studying. And so I ended up putting on, like 120. So I think I entered undergrad at like 130, and I'm 4'11", and I think I graduated from undergrad at about 200, untrained, with a pack a day smoking habit. So not exactly great, but the education was free. Ended up building my CV. I thought I wanted to be an organic chemistry professor. And so ended up getting into a bunch of different awesome graduate programs that offer that. And so on paper, it looked amazing. And when my alma mater, San Francisco State, did an article on me about this, new fellowship program that they are starting up, and they did a piece about me. all I could see, the first thing I saw was the picture, and I didn't recognize myself. And all I could think about was how awful I thought I looked, and how embarrassed I was to be featured on that article when they're saying all these really nice things and talking about the research that I'm doing. And all I can think about is, gosh, I just want to crawl into a hole and like hide. So I took a little bit of a detour, in grad school, and I knew that, this was not sustainable. By the time I got to grad school, I knew that what I did in undergrad, probably not the best thing for my health. So I quit smoking cold turkey, which I know is hard, not easy for a lot of people.
This is really myth busting the idea that weight gain is solely due to a lack of willpower. Because you're doing enormous acts of showing how much willpower you have. You're quitting smoking cold turkey, which is notoriously hard. You're succeeding academically in very complex fields. So you're putting in willpower, but clearly this wasn't what the issue was for you. It was something outside of willpower.
Yeah. And I just didn't realize it at the time. So it took me a number of years in grad school, and then I ended up leaving to go to med school because I decided I wanted to be a physician and not an organic chemistry professor. And so it took me a number of years to just get back on track, learn how to cook again, learn how to cook and appreciate what a vegetable is, because the taste buds are much different when you're a smoker. And then when you quit, things become a lot more palatable in a different sort of way. And so I had actually lost losing the first, I would say at 200, losing the first 30 to 35 pounds was always easy. It's always sort of, kind of move around, clean up your diet, whatever that looks like. It was never really a hard thing. It's once I moved down to, 165 or so, that things become progressively more exponentially more difficult. And so I remember a really big transformation. I went down from, I'd say, down to 130 pounds right before entering med school. And looking back, I wasn't particularly lean. I wasn't like bodybuilding show type of physique or even a, shape cover model physique. It was pretty soft. Didn't have a lot of muscle mass on me. But going into the summer of medical, into medical school, there was an accelerated anatomy program for all the overachievers who wanted to spend their summer doing anatomy. So in the fall, you could teach anatomy to all of the regular people who took the summer off. Nice. And I just remember after dieting for a whole year and just remembering what the hunger pangs were like just tossing and turning up until 4 a.m, just this insatiable, food focused, hunger drive, where I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat anything because I'm trying to, this is what I got to do, right? This is the willpower. If this is what I got to do to be some semblance of not thin, but kind of thin, then here we go. And I ended up failing anatomy, by a couple percentage points just because I couldn't focus. I would just show up a zombie during anatomy lab. And then forget it, trying to do flashcards, through one ear and out the other. Mm-hmm. And so.
Were you working with physicians at the time? Not necessarily as part of the medical school journey, but maybe even in the post-grad time. Were you seeing a doctor to discuss your health? Were you getting labs drawn? Were you getting advice? So
I did have some labs drawn. And I did see a doctor every now and again. And I didn't really talk to them about weight management. They had brought it up every now and again, oh, you're overweight. I think at one point my triglycerides were a little bit elevated, 150, 155, but nothing too terrible that, we've really got to intervene with it. Mm-hmm. So Yeah.
So they brushed over it kind of.
A little bit, but also I wasn't super proactive about like, hey, I have this hunger problem because, so it wasn't until,
just so we don't gloss over this, because I think it's important, but feel free to pass on the question if you're uncomfortable answering it.
Yeah.
Was mental health ever discussed in these doctor's visits? Was it something that was at the top of your mind that perhaps you needed counseling, you needed therapy to discuss any of these issues?
No, that's a really great point. And the answer is no, because I was pretty focused on, med school. That was the only thing at the time that I cared about, other than, this other thing here. Probably would have helped a lot sooner if I would have done that. But no.
Why do you think it would have helped?
I think it would also given me a place to talk about the emotional aspect of what I was going through, because now I've just failed anatomy. I feel like a failure. The first 2 years of medical school were pretty, I don't want to say traumatic, but I always had that chip on my shoulder of I'm hungry all the time. And now my weight is spiking back up because of that insatiable hunger drive that is now back. But at least my sleep is better. And then also, I feel like a failure. I feel like a complete failure going into med school. And I just never want to fail another class again. So I'm kind of stuck between like, I want to be healthy, but I don't know how. But then I've tried asking people about, my most pressing thing right now is to not fail out of med school. I'm slowly racking up debt. So I want this. And so, I put a lot of those kind of weight loss stuff aside and just kind of put my blinders on and, just did the best that I could with what I had. And that was just passing. I just wanted to pass.
Yeah. That's such an emotionally turbulent time without seeking help. Did you have any strategies that worked well for you at the time, or was it just not going well and you were pushing along as best you could?
So I had kind of sought the advice of, after the whole, failure, I did seek the advice of an online nutrition coach, because it was actually a bodybuilding coach that kind of helped get me to that failure point. And I realized that wasn't going to work. So I just stopped communicating with that person. And I had reached out to somebody, a female kind of coach that I had kind of gotten to know a little bit on the internet. I really wasn't on Instagram quite yet. She seemed very compassionate, seemed, like she knew her stuff. And so I had a long conversation with her. I actually told her my story of what happened. And she was the first person to tell me, like, hey, I don't think trying to chase fat loss is a really good goal for you right now. It sounds like there's a lot going on. You have a lot on your plate right now. Let's get you to a place where you don't feel hungry, but you feel satiated and you're filling yourself up with very nutritious foods. So let's get to that place and let's see how, your weight's stabilizing. Cause I think that's more important than chasing this like previous goal that you had, which and she said, I understand that if this is still your goal, then I don't think I can be very helpful for you. But if you are, willing to shift your goals, then we can work together. And I think that was the first time that, I was a little miffed by it at first, but I ended up taking on her offer because I was like, yeah, that actually sounds like it makes sense.
Why were you miffed?
Because I was so emotional about this, thing that I had just failed. I really wanted to get back down to this size. And then she kind of just snapped me out of it. And I really thought about the pros and cons. I thought about everything that had just happened, failing anatomy, feeling out of control, the sleepless nights, that I was like, you know what, for my own sanity, I think this does seem like a better deal to me. And so,
what do you think worked so well about her approach that it got you to make this change, not just from a practical standpoint, but mentally? You seemed kind of perhaps offended or miffed, as you put it. Why did it still work? Why was she effective in getting you to change that?
I think she just laid it out there very plainly, and she was very honest about what she could provide as a nutrition coach, and what she couldn't provide. And so, for me, that's really important. I think being very honest and upfront about, things like side effects, things like potential pros and cons, I think are super helpful. And I definitely tend to, when I talk to patients, I definitely err more on the side of like under promising and over delivering, making sure we're really good on knowing what the side effects are versus saying like, this is going to be the most amazing thing ever. Like it's going to be life changing. I don't know that because I don't know, everybody's different. So
that makes sense. And you started working with this individual. What happened then? How did it transform?
I got to a place where I was back at 150 pounds, but I was stable. And I just had a routine, a nice stable routine. It was boring, but effective, like 4 meals a day. Here's what I'm going to eat. And I think it just took some of that, kind of mental fatigue out, the decision fatigue out. So I could just focus on studying and, because I had other things to worry about, like step one.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if it's the same boring 4 meals, then, I can just batch cook them and just kind of, put it in a Tupperware, leave it alone. I don't have to think about it.
Medical school is notoriously a competitive place. There's the term gunner that's often used where someone's actively trying to set up others for failure or outperform everyone else. Did you ever hold any resentment to your classmates because they didn't have to think about food this much, because they perhaps could eat whenever they wanted? How did you feel in those times?
Oh, man. I actually felt really supported by my colleagues. And wow. I remember when choosing medical schools, I just remember everybody at this particular interview just seemed real and awesome and didn't have that gunner mentality. And that's actually why, probably one of the biggest reasons why I ended up going there, because I'm going to have to spend the next 4 years with this cohort, and I don't want it to be like we're all going to do well. And somebody has to be at the top. I understand. But if you have to sabotage somebody to, that zero sum kind of game, it's just not going to work. And so I do remember some guys talking about lean gains, like how hard it is to gain weight while eating chicken breast, broccoli, and rice, like plain foods. And I just remember at one point, really just trying to stuff myself like with these whole foods that are lower in calories. And I would just ended up with a very bloated stomach. And my brain is still telling me, like, you can still eat, like, I can still eat, like, a whole ton of stuff, but my stomach is just out to here. And so I remember getting a little, like, I would roll my eyes a little bit, but never resentful towards them, if that makes sense. Because they also never really said anything to me about it. They, we used to do push-ups after, every lecture together.
Really?
Like there's a little crew of us.
What was that? Push-ups? I've heard of people going out for drinks after a test, but push-ups.
There was a couple of us that did that. People did get drinks after. They would actually drive to Las Vegas and go out for a weekend after every exam. But a couple of us did some push-ups to try and stay active.
Okay, that's fun. The way you talk about how you felt in your mind, the word addiction comes to mind, and there's been some controversy in the nutrition space about whether food addiction is an accurate term. Is it fair to be used? How do you feel about the term, and how do you feel it specifically in your scenario, when it's tied to your scenario?
I'll be honest, it doesn't feel great to kind of... I can see why people might associate that, especially now that they are starting to do studies on, substance use disorders and GLP-1 agonists. I don't particularly like using the word addiction. I'm not sure why, to be honest. Maybe just, that's just my own bias and my own kind of, doesn't seem fair. But if there is that reward pathway that kind of is involved with kind of hedonic eating, so I can see why people would use addiction as that term, but from, and I wouldn't be particularly offended if people started using that to describe this type of hunger signaling, because there's a lot of overlapping pathways. But personally, I just, for whatever reason, I'm not really interested. And there are other ways that I guess I would like to describe it.
How would you describe it?
It's not, the hunger I experienced throughout my life is not just a psychological, kind of feeling, but also there are these physical hunger cues that I can't ignore. So it's both, a physical and psychological thing that is happening. And it's this, drive to eat. Because I think the other part to addiction is, I can stop using cigarettes. I don't need cigarettes, but I still need to find a way I can't avoid food forever.
Right.
And so that's the part that becomes super difficult.
Yeah, it's why some individuals will struggle with alcoholism, where they say, well, I'll try and get back to social drinking, but they may struggle with the ability to self-regulate once they have one or two drinks to not continue moving forward. But with food, that's mandatory. You need to always have those one or two drinks in the food world. So it's always tempting to want to continue to go back to that space. And it makes it very difficult. The physical manifestations are largely not talked about, by how it impacts hormonal shifts, how it impacts things like sleep, as you mentioned, moods, ability to form and retain memory. Like, that is what is important in our everyday lives when we talk about quality of life. And people will write those off as, just because you're being lazy. And people like to take shortcuts in reasoning. So I understand why they're doing it, but we just have to remind them that's not accurate in every scenario. Yeah. And it's worthwhile that you're sharing your story. So obviously I want to be grateful for that.
Oh, thank you.
So you're finishing medical school. The medical training is so long. You're now having to choose which residency you want to go into. Why family medicine for you?
Oh, for me, it was, I couldn't say no to like one particular group. I really liked the balance, you never know what you're going to get, the pregnant patient with her kids, or, some elderly person. Like, I loved all of that. So I love the variety. It keeps you on your toes. And, you build this net, just a little bit, and, just enough to figure out, like, there are things that you can manage, but also there's a team of specialists who just do cardiology, who just do neurology. And it's really important to have that network. So that way, if you do need to send somebody to a specialist, being able to communicate with them, to get the most out of it, the best treatment for your patient, I think, is also super important. So I liked that kind of, being kind of the quarterback or being like the manager person. And so I find myself, in non-clinical positions, like really enjoying that aspect. Like, if I don't know the answer to this, I'm going to find the specialist who does, and I'm going to ask them that specific question, and I'm not going to stop until we come to an answer and a good action plan.
Is that what you expected going into medical school, that you would choose family medicine?
No, not necessarily. At one point, I was thinking about physical medicine and rehab, I think, as a choice. And I think those were the only two that I was looking at. Mm-hmm. I definitely wanted to do something sports related. And so I knew that whatever I wanted to do, I wanted to take care of athletes. So, I knew that family medicine, there's a lot of different pathways to a sports medicine fellowship.
And why athletes?
I at one point, wanted to be an athlete. I loved volleyball, but, my genetics, did not allow me to kind of pursue that. So, at various points of my undergraduate career, I thought about ways in which I could still work with athletes. I had thought about going to PT school, and decided I loved math and chemistry way more at the time. So I decided to put it aside. And I just really love working with that, motivated. They're, doing all sorts of amazing things. And so it's, but it's not just that subset of the population that I enjoy, taking care of. It's also people who love being active, and trying to get more of the general population sort of in that recreational athlete space. That would be the dream, but
tough for everybody.
Yeah.
I kind of left medical school, maybe even residency, with the notion of I want to treat my 1-year-old and a 101-year-old patient as an athlete. So when we had patients who were diagnosed with Parkinson's, I realized how important it was to keep them active in order to decrease the effects of the condition, decrease perhaps side effects of the medications they were taking, and treat it like a rehabilitation process. Because the human body, what makes it special is that unlike a car, when it breaks down, it doesn't heal.
Yeah.
The human body can actually heal. And part of our osteopathic education is we need to give the body whatever it needs to heal and not overdo it. Which is sometimes lost in healthcare because we love to overdo it.
Oh, we do.
So you're going into your family medicine education. How are you dealing with food noise at the time, with nutrition as a whole?
Yeah. I knew that the extreme dieting was definitely out of the question because now I'm responsible for this panel of patients, and there was nothing that I was going to do to jeopardize that. Like, I did not want to be on call, like starving and then miss something because I was doing something super, selfish, like trying to get like some sort of like, fat loss diet for whatever reason. And so, I knew that training, I loved to exercise. I loved to train, resistance train. And so that was always going to be a stable thing for me. So I was still lifting heavy, X amount of days a week, pretty consistently throughout residency, which was really awesome and helpful in a lot of situations.
Which is a time where people usually get really unhealthy because they stop caring about themselves. They're working such long hours, notoriously eating some garbage in the hospital cafeteria, which I don't know why.
Yeah.
In a place where we're preaching health and wellness, the food options are like bread in 10 different forms and breaded chicken.
Yes.
Fried breaded chicken.
Yes. The cafeteria that I was at was not all that great. And so despite that, I was working with a physician at the time for weight management stuff. And so at various points of my residency, I had tried, I've been put on different medications that were used off label for weight management. One was Contrave, which is bupropion and naltrexone, Topamax, or topiramate, and I think that's about it. Yeah. And then the last one was Wegovy, which I said no to for various reasons, but that was a little bit further on down the line. Contrave, I broke out into the worst hives ever. So that was not an ideal choice. And didn't do anything for my hunger to begin with. And then Topamax didn't do anything for my hunger, and I had the worst brain fog / word forgetfulness, which was pretty obvious. And during rounds, just very simple had all of my stuff right here in front of me and still couldn't figure out very simple words. And so,
that's so hard.
Yeah, apparently they call it Dopamax.
Interesting.
So both of those I said no to after the side effects.
I'm curious if it ever raised a flag in your mind, because I know in medical school, I've seen some of the students that I've been with use Adderall to help them study, but it's also notoriously an appetite suppressant. Did that ever go into your mind as a potential thing with other classmates using it perhaps, or did that not happen in your mind or in your school?
So not necessarily Adderall for me, but I definitely, have a higher tolerance for caffeine. And so, White Monster Ultra was kind of my,
I don't know how many milligrams of caffeine are in that. It's got to be high, 300, 400.
So, I want to say it's 160, and then the bang energy is about 300, I think. Yeah, and so it didn't really
is bang the sound that your heart makes when it goes into arrhythmia?
Exactly. And so it didn't really do a whole lot, like maybe temporarily, but it just wasn't there. And then your tolerance goes up with caffeine, and so yeah, it was just there to keep me awake on those 24-hour shifts.
Yeah, those are brutal shifts.
Right.
Do you have any patients that stick out to you from residency that were an interesting patient?
Oh, gosh. Interesting in the sense of...
that you would tell at a party. Hey, I had this patient. Oh, man.
There was an older gentleman who would call every time I was on night shift, just to make sure, like, his multivitamin, he was, was a bit older and he wasn't sure if he took his multivitamin. So should he take his multivitamin now, or if he takes 2, is it going to be terrible? And so every evening, I would have to call, cause you would get paged and have to call back and, have to
have a discussion
about a multivitamin while I'm at the hospital handling stuff.
Wow.
So,
well, that's cute. In deciding your future after family medicine, how did you land on doing the fellowship?
That was right around the pandemic. Ended up moving to Las Vegas for a sports med fellowship. And then COVID hit. Wasn't sure where we were going to end up. Wasn't sure what was happening. I decided to volunteer in the ICU because they needed help at the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did it impact your education? I'm sure you had less face time, right?
It was definitely interesting in the sense of we actually went on vacation to Thailand. It was like the one vacation you get to take, like the week off you get to take a year.
Sure.
Returned back and nobody was in the airport. And I was like, oh, this is serious. Like nobody's playing, because you kind of heard that this thing was coming, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. You get there, and so it impacted us in a way that I think, it makes a whole lot of sense. So I spent a lot of time during my residency calling my patients on the phone and having conversations with them about, their labs, or checking in on them if they couldn't get into the office. And so for me, it was actually just a fine transition to do everything via telemedicine or a phone call, because I had spent a lot of time just chatting with them on the phone, after clinic is done, because for, whatever reason, I wanted to call my patients and let them know, regardless if their labs were normal, if their labs were abnormal, I told them I was going to call them either way. Yeah. And so it seemed like a natural transition to do everything via the phone. But
hard for sports medicine, though.
Yes.
Because if someone says they have knee pain,
they have to
do
come
a
in.
physical exam.
Yeah.
Virtually.
It definitely impacted college sports. And so everything was sort of put on hold. But a lot of college sports, yes, there's like knee pain. Yes, there's the musculoskeletal part of that. There's also still a lot of, colds, stomach flu,
sure,
and all this other stuff that you have to manage. So despite the fact that, I entered the sports medicine fellowship in 2020 and then finished in 2021, still managed to like be a busy bee, still see a lot. They kind of had a kind of shortened football season, but then they took all of the sports from the fall and put it into the spring. And so that's where I got the full experience of.
Got it. So you were busy then.
Yes.
Is that when you were initially offered the Wegovy prescription?
Yeah. And
how did that go? Back to the interview in just a second, but first I want to tell you about Cozy Earth, a bedding and loungewear brand made with viscose. That's a natural cellulose found in bamboo, which makes super soft sheets and stretchy pajamas that wick away moisture and create air circulation to prevent heat trapping, essentially letting you sleep cooler. Lowering your body temperature in bed is one of the best evidence-based ways to improve your sleep. The holidays are here, and that means we'll be spending a lot more time indoors cozying up on the couch. It also means you'll be spending time buying presents for your friends and family. Cozy Earth pajamas make for the perfect gift for anyone because I believe the evidence backs this up. Everyone sleeps. They offer a risk-free purchase too. Sleep on the sheets or in the PJs for 100 nights, and if you don't like it, you could send them back. They also come with a 10-year warranty. I love that peace of mind. From Thanksgiving Day through Cyber Monday, get 40% off at cozyearth.com with the code Dr. Mike. Remember, doctor is spelled out. It's the best deal of the year. And if you get a post-purchase survey, make sure to let them know where you heard about Cozy Earth right here. Wrap the ones you love in luxury with Cozy Earth. All right, let's get back to the interview.
At the time, I just, the insurance wasn't going to cover it.
How come?
A school insurance. And to be honest, I didn't really push that hard for it. And then two, I actually had to take a pay cut in fellowship, because academia pays a lot less than some community programs. So I didn't want to pay out of pocket for it. And then, three, the needle aspect of it, because it's subcutaneous. The pen just didn't seem like, I had reservations about taking a weekly injection myself. And then I was just so busy with fellowship and doing well, doing research to kind of pass the time, since I wasn't seeing as many, musculoskeletal cases as I would have liked to. And then kind of doing my own kind of ultrasound, self-learning course in the meantime, that I was like, nah, this isn't, I won't push for it. I'll think about it some other time and kind of move on from there.
And then I heard in other conversations, you said at that point you burnt out on medicine. And after fellowship, you said no mas.
Yeah, I did. And it took a long time to kind of move on from that. It was trying to do everything all at once. By the time we moved to Michigan from Las Vegas, I told my husband I don't want to do anything related to medicine for a while. I don't know what I want.
How come?
At the time, I had like I said, the last the last half of my fellowship year was pretty busy. And I had gained a fair amount of weight back. I was back at like 185 pounds. I had some chronic nagging injuries. My elbow was giving me some problems. And so I was pretty broken at the end of fellowship. I was not in a healthy place. I was also, going out and having a couple of drinks and then having some high fat, tasty foods. So I was not in a healthy spot physically. And so I think that definitely wore on me emotionally. And I think that's definitely part of what contributed to it. And the pandemic, sure. I wasn't sure where I was going to go with the state of medicine at the time. And so
what was the emotional state at the time?
A lot of people just seemed really upset and overworked. And I definitely took a lot of that in and internalized it, and kind of, people seemed really tired of working long hours. The amount of testing that we had, testing that we had to do to keep the athletes healthy, and then the amount of even more testing we had to do to make sure, if they do have COVID, to get them back on the track. Like, we didn't have the support at my fellowship to kind of keep things sustainable. And so I was working really crappy hours, getting up even earlier to manage all of this. And I just, and everybody was just so awful to one another that I was like, I don't know if I want to stay. Like, why would I want to stay in an environment? Like, not only am I working long hours, I'm working with people who, a lot of them are great. A lot of them are awesome. And I still have a lot of colleagues that I still chat with, but a fair number of people also were pretty miserable and just sort of passed that along to everybody else.
Were you regretting the choice to pivot off of organic chemistry and going into healthcare?
No.
So what was the thought process then?
Back then, that I actually wanted to be a part of patient care and not necessarily.
Well, no, not back then, meaning back then in you finishing fellowship, what's in your mind that you were having a bad time at this specific program, but to say like, I no longer want to practice medicine is different than saying I don't want to practice medicine in this specific area. So what shifted there? Because that's a big shift. I mean, you were really worried in your med school days of how much money you're spending on the education, that you were saying, I'll gain the weight. I don't mind because I don't want this money to go to waste. But now that you're much further along the journey, you became comfortable with saying, I'm not going to do this. So what changed there?
I think it's also knowing that there are other avenues that I can explore that can provide me the financial security that I don't have to feel like I'm in debt and therefore I need to, pay off this loan. I was very lucky in that part of that was actually paid off. I actually spent an extra year in medical school doing a teaching fellowship. And so part of that, helped with that debt. And then the other part was, what are some different avenues I can explore that not really tied to medicine right now. And we'll see where it goes. So I gave myself like a 6-month kind of runway of, all right, let's do something different and then revisit this in, about 6 months. And I took a marketing internship, doing marketing research for a couple of months with Renaissance periodization before I decided to start looking into how do I open up kind of a very small private practice.
And how did that journey go?
It went well. I really enjoyed talking to people, and it was just a nice change of pace. And made me realize how much I miss talking to patients and I miss having that relationship and that interaction, which is what led me to kind of start looking at what are my options to open up a private practice? Does it have to be brick and mortar? Can it be telehealth only? What kinds of things can I provide service-wise?
Mm-hmm. And you clearly at that time, you said no to Wegovy. When did Wegovy enter your life?
January of 2022. So graduated from fellowship in July of 2021, started looking at private practice stuff like November of 2021. And then 2022 was when I decided, like, I think I'm ready. I think it's time.
What drove that decision?
Combination of different things. I had some long conversations with my husband about, what is it? What have I been avoiding? What do I not like? Like, why are you all of a sudden, you've taken these other drugs, what makes this so different? I think a lot of my hesitation was, again, my sort of ego thinking that, maybe it is just willpower. I can just do it again, right? Like, I'm out of residency. I'm out of fellowship now. I can just focus on sort of myself maybe and, do it the old fashioned way like everybody else has done. But Mike, my husband, has seen me struggle for so long, for so many years that, and watching him kind of go through his bodybuilding journey, and you realize towards the end of a kind of a really extreme diet, how food focused and how insatiable their hunger hunger drive becomes. And so I really started to think about my genetics and really started to think about maybe my food drive is just genetically predisposed to this sort of situation that I'm in. Because I'm neither lean nor trying to get down to shredded levels of body composition. Why, we use air conditioning. We, have self-driving cars now. Why am I making this thing so hard on myself? I've made it so hard on myself for the last how many decades? This drug has been around, this class of drugs has been around for a very long time. I've prescribed this class of drugs to people with type 2 diabetes. Like, it's no big thing. Why am I now having such hesitation with it? And so I just was like, all right, let's just see what happens. I've talked about this enough. And I just remember going to San Diego with him and, just going out to eat, and I ordered a steak with some, steamed broccoli on the side, and I had a glass of wine, and I just remember looking at him and just being able to have a conversation with him without thinking about how starving I am. And starving would be probably just the most appropriate use of that word. And just being able to just enjoy the meal and not feel like I have to clean that plate up. And I could just have a couple sips of wine and just put it down, and we can just have a nice dinner together where I'm just not overly worried about how hungry I am, but like, I don't want him to think that like I'm this ravenous, psychotic being who would just like shovel the food into her face. And I have to think about drinking water with every sip and chewing my food for 30 times before I swallow. It was just this sense of inner peace that I just didn't know existed. And I just remember looking at him like, this is just, wow, why didn't I take this medication sooner? And I cannot tell you how amazing it is to be on the other side. So when I think of people who in the past have always been like, yeah, losing weight's just so easy, you just sort of eat less, and like, yeah, it's kind of hard, but it's no big deal. My hunger drive has been an 11 right now, and now it's like at a 2. Like, food is awesome. It's great. It's actually just great, but it's not this awesome drive that like I've had in the past where it's like, yes, it's amazing. Mm-hmm. It's just sort of like, yes, this is a lovely meal. This is lovely.
It sounds like similarly how I discuss with my patients about starting perhaps SSRI antidepressants, that the goal is not to make you a less subdued version of yourself. It's just to give you more control. So you could make choices about when you want to be sad, when you want to be angry. If you're feeling sad, how to cheer yourself up. In a situation like that, you were giving yourself back the control as opposed to something internally guiding all of your decisions. And it sounded like it wasn't just guiding your decisions around food. It was more so guiding your decisions around joy and life, more broad topics. Did you feel that?
Oh, yeah. I feel like these last, 3 years, 3.5 years has been a period of tremendous growth that I didn't realize was possible, because now I can show up and I can be my best self at work. I can be my best self as a spouse and as a friend, and start to go to therapy and really start to do this inner work that I didn't, how to communicate and how to regulate my emotions, because now this hunger thing has been removed. And so ironically now I'm 145 pounds now. My BMI is overweight, and I feel I'm living my best life. Like, I'm not super shredded. But I've done all these amazing other things outside of just the diet and exercise that I didn't realize was possible, because I've been thinking about this hunger drive for so long that it's just eaten away at every other aspect of my life that I didn't realize was doing it at the time.
Is it fair to say that weight for you wasn't the number, it was the hunger? That because right now it seems like your focus is not even about the weight, not even really about the fitness. It's about how your life has come together. That's what I'm hearing from you, as opposed to I'm at a healthy weight, I'm happier at this weight. You're talking about things that are completely unrelated to weight, and yet you're talking about a weight-related medication.
Yeah, but I guess the weight is still part of it, but I didn't realize how less of it becomes less about the weight, and it just becomes this, yes, now I have the freedom to just show up and like do all sorts of other amazing things because I'm not spending all of this cognitive bandwidth thinking about food and about how hungry I am. And so, yeah, I remember thinking that people who kind of talk about like it's more than, just your weight. And, you would have asked me 10 years ago, I've been like, that's total BS. But here I am now,
Is that what you would have told your patients?
No, I wouldn't have said, no, that's BS.
No, not necessarily in that way. But did you believe that and that's what you were educating your patients with?
I think there was a certain point where I had said, it's not just about the weight. I think that was a very brief period where I was feeling pretty emotional about me not being able to control my hunger. Very early on in med school, I remember kind of thinking that, it's not about the weight. It's not about the weight. But at a certain point it is, because at 185, 190, joints start to hurt. I can't walk a block without feeling winded and having, incredible back cramps. And so, it becomes a huge, and I was snoring. Didn't have diagnosed sleep apnea, but the snoring was pretty awful, according to my husband. So
I'm sure he made a joke or two about that. So, speaking of Mike, what's it like, being married to Mike during a time like this?
Yeah.
And B, does it help or hurt in the journey being married to someone who's a bodybuilder?
It's a great question. Mike has been the most amazing partner, husband, boyfriend throughout this whole journey. It was actually one of the very first things that I remember having a conversation with him when we first started talking was kind of my stance on fitness and
because didn't you meet on a Facebook forum or something? Like he had some joke reel about this I saw the other day.
Yeah, there was a picture of him at the Arnold with a couple of other bodybuilder / powerlifter people that I sort of knew from the Facebook powerlifting scene, because I had powerlifted competitively in med school and then in residency.
I love how you totally left that out casually. You're like, oh, my weight was 10 pounds over. I didn't like it, but you were also powerlifting competitive.
And so he reached out and we just started chatting on Facebook briefly right before I had to go into hiding to take step one. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I was done with step one, I called him and we talked nonstop the entire night. I got out of Prometric and called him. And then by the time we stopped talking, it was like 6 a.m. We just, he has, and so yeah, when we were talking, I said, my philosophy on fitness is this. I really enjoy exercising regularly and I enjoy eating nutritious foods regularly, but I am not a bodybuilder. I'm not going to be a bodybuilder. I don't think ever. And so if you are looking for somebody who wants to be some sort of fitness, lean person, I don't think I'm the girl for you. And also, if you are not physically attracted to me, then we, should probably part ways. Cause I've also had, interactions where people have told me you have an awesome personality, but I'm not attracted to you looks wise.
Outright?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
Was that a partner that said that, or just someone on the street casually coming up to you?
So people, no, these were people off of a forum.
Okay.
And
well, those are where the intelligent people live.
Right.
So.
Exactly. So I just wanted to make it no, I take that back.
There's a lot of disordered eating, food noise individuals, perhaps overuse of performance enhancing medications? Is there a lot of disorder in that community from that regard? Or is that just something that the general public believes, but doesn't actually bear out once you study the population?
You know, really, it'd be interesting to see what that, what, if anybody has done studies on that to see if there's a higher, eating disorder prevalence. I want to say there is, but I haven't taken a good look at it. And I don't know necessarily if it's the bodybuilding lifestyle itself that self-selects these people, or if it's, they're already coming in with sort of disordered eating and then they just find bodybuilding as like a
home where perhaps it's acceptable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, you've worked with the figure skating community before, and historically there have been issues with people going on crash diets, trying to overly control their weight. Is that something you saw when you worked in that community?
Thankfully, no. I have not. And I think there's a really big emphasis on making sure that you fuel your performance, making sure that you are strong and healthy is also a huge thing, which I have been seeing, which I think is a really great message. Because you run into all sorts of things when you undereat and underfuel. Those skaters really their joints take a beating, especially with those jumps.
Yep.
Thankfully, no.
Have you seen GLP-1 medications used as performance enhancing drugs in the sporting world?
Not in the sporting world, thankfully. Right now, it's on the monitored list for WADA. So I'll be very interested to see where it ends up going, where we end up in 2026. I don't make the rules, but, particularly for weight class sports, I would think it makes sense that, the drug might not be applicable for, either in competition or even off season, because, it would theoretically help you get into a lower weight class by removing that hunger noise.
And then what happens if you have diabetes or one of these conditions that would benefit from one of these meds?
Yeah, that becomes a very
complicated issue.
The
lines are all blurring in these in the medical performance space.
It is
because there's also new medications on the horizon about perhaps limiting the negative muscle loss effects of GLP-1 medications. Have you heard much about that?
Briefly, I know Mike is very excited about these medications. We'll see where it goes. It doesn't seem like, I think some of them are on phase 2 trials, but
still too early.
Still way too early. I'm much, once it starts hitting phase 3 trials and beyond, then I'll start to kind of look at it. But I mean, right now, the most important things with, preserving muscle is resistance training and protein intake. Which a
lot of people aren't doing.
Yes.
That's what I'm finding, not necessarily in my patient population, but more so personal life of when I hear people are taking these medications. They're using them for the benefit of losing some weight, sometimes vanity weight, and they're not doing those things. Do you believe that to be harmful?
I don't think that's necessarily the best route to go, when it comes to using these drugs. And I think it gives it, particularly if you are making, social media reels talking about the experience, I can see why, the medical community would, and also the fitness community would feel some type of way. Thankfully, and the reason why I wanted to come here and speak is because there's always that pendulum shifting with, now you do have a lot of, kind of the TikTok crowd kind of doing this vanity weight loss. And then you have the fitness community really kind of lashing out on GLP-1 medications as a whole.
Why is the fitness community so mad about GLP-1 medications?
Really great question. I think there's also something to be explored within themselves as a coach. Is it really like your own ego that's, because why is it so awful for somebody to, are they not doing it the right way? I feel like at times I may have gotten a pass for being, okay, Christle, Dr. Christle is this spokesperson for GLP-1s because I've done the resistance training since 2009. She's done this she's always had a high protein intake, despite the fact that she has, increased her calories or has this insatiable hunger drive. At least she gets her protein in, at least she resistance trains. So she's like doing all the right things for it. I think there was also a huge scare in the very beginning, at least from the feedback that I had seen when I first started talking about this, that their jobs would be kind of done with. And I almost want to say that that's actually couldn't be further from the truth. We actually need people in the fitness community now more than ever, because they're the ones who are going to be talking about protein intake, or how, here are some recipes to, that you can use, or let's put together a program for you that involves resistance training, and have those multiple points of check-in, weekly, so you can stay on top of it. So I would say, coaches are way more needed now that we have this hunger problem solved. We'll see what happens when the, myostatin inhibitors kind of come. But I would still say, even then, I would say that building a community is probably going to be the most, is going to be super valuable. Having human face-to-face interactions are still very valuable.
Do you think that perhaps there's a correct way to think about GLP-1 medications as someone who's prescribed them, as someone who's found tremendous benefit from them, but at the same time as aware of people who misuse them? What is the correct way that we should be thinking about them so that we're not marginalizing one of those communities?
That's a really great question. I feel like the biggest, the most popular question that I always get asked is, you have somebody who wants to lose the last 10 to 15 pounds and, is this medication appropriate for this person? And I would argue that, it's hard for me to figure out what that last 10 to 15 pounds looks like unless I have a person who's standing right in front of me. First off, I guess unless your BMI is like 18 or something, obviously low, even somebody whose BMI is still 23, 24, 25, like right underneath the overweight category, I would still take it on a case-by-case basis, because they could have type 2 diabetes hiding under the hood that might actually make them applicable for, or a good candidate for these medications. Really thinking about digging into their past diet history. What have they tried in the past? What have they failed? What is their schedule? What does their day-to-day look like now? And then also taking a look at their comorbidities, not just the weight portion, but also the struggle. Because if diet and exercise didn't work the first time, what makes you think that it's going to work this time, and why? I mean, I know that there's a lot of people who, are able to have success losing weight without these medications. But I would also argue that the benefit of putting them on this medication and trying it may just be the catalyst for them to start eating better, start lifting, start actually getting into the gym and resistance training. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be on the medication forever. I know the research says that most of the people who end up discontinuing these medications end up gaining a lot of the weight back. But I also think there have been patients who have stopped and are still doing great. So I don't know if that necessarily answered your question.
No. It does. It's like trying to find that balance of when we use it versus when we don't, and not just demonizing it or hyper celebrating it across the board, because it's a medication. Yeah. There are times where it's applicable, times it's not. Yeah. And that's why sometimes when I get invited on podcasts, I remember I went on Howie Mandel's show, and he said, "What do you think of Ozempic?" And it's like, I don't think anything of it. I think it's a medication and that I use it sometimes where it's appropriate, and we don't when it's not. Yeah. And that's going to be different for each patient. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on pill mills, or perhaps maybe not pill mills in this case, shot mills of companies that are popping up left and right online that are giving these medications to people that they're not adequately following, that are not adequately doing the resistance training and the nutritional protein changes that you recommended. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I can't. I ideally wouldn't. Don't really. I'm not a huge fan of them. But I think if I spent my time being angry at the pill mills, I find that I'm just going to end up in a really angry, just the amount of energy it would take to either try and shut them down or, rat on them on Instagram so their accounts get blocked is just not my way of going about things. So ideally it would not be great. And you should go talk to a doctor. My big thing is, if you are going to do that, I would hope that there's somebody out there, somebody that you can, trust and get some sort of good information about protein intake and resistance training, and kind of navigate your way around there, because that is the scariest thing about some of these places is that there's no real oversight. It's just sort of, here you go. And then, so either side effects happen and there's no communication on their end, or they'll just keep losing and they'll, not lose the muscle too, and then feel like, oh, these people didn't really, this medication didn't work. I just ended up with Ozempic butt or something.
Yeah. There's a concern that I have in the back of my head that perhaps is unwarranted, but may play out, where we've had this explosion of opioids because people ended up getting addicted to them. We had an explosion of overprescription of Adderall for teenagers that are in college that perhaps don't have a true diagnosis of ADHD. There's some instances where people routinely prescribe SSRIs without doing a full mental health evaluation, just reflexively, oh, you're not feeling great, here you go. I don't want it to become where these GLP-1 medications end up playing that role, where it's just reflexive, oh, your BMI is in this category, like a robot, you get a prescription for it without all the other additive features that need to be discussed, without the holistic viewpoint of what's going on in their life. What is the last 10 to 20 pounds for them? When someone tells me that they have tried dieting, what does that mean? Because they could have followed the Dr. Gundry diet or the cabbage and soup diet.
Cabbage soup
diet. So dieting means something different for everyone. And without truly spending the time to figure out who that individual is, we can hyper celebrate the medication, then get into another problem.
Yeah.
So I love that the medicine worked for you. I love that it made such an impact. I mean, it's visible that it impacted your life in ways that go so much further than your cholesterol score, the number on the scale, your relationships in life, your joy with your work, just things that you can't even quantitatively measure, but they're very important in your life. So how do we celebrate your case, but also not bring too much promise where people are like, I can't be positive, I can't be successful without the medication? So where's that fine line?
Yeah, I think it's it's always a nuanced it's always a conversation, and I always encourage people to talk to their doctor and have that,
back and forth.
Start that back and forth, because there's no, I don't think that's ever going to be misconstrued as terrible advice. Unfortunately, when you do go to a pill mill, it's not necessarily a doctor who knows you and does a thorough intake of who you are, what you value, what your life has been like. And so it is hard, because then those don't get the clicks. Those don't get the attention that a 30-second, reel might get on Instagram. And so I guess I always, I never want to come off as somebody like, this drug is amazing and everybody should be on it, because not everybody should be on it. But for people who are struggling, and I find that the people who are struggling aren't the people who are talking about, these drugs. So I have quite a few people in my, DMs who have, come to me and say, I'm really, I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm struggling with this, but I don't, really, is this for me? And so I always just encourage people to go to their doctor and have a conversation about it, because only then can they figure out what are the pros and cons of this drug? Is this drug even appropriate? And so I just wanted to make sure that like that doesn't get lost in translation.
Sure. What's on the horizon for you? What are you most excited about?
Gosh, I do a lot of stuff on the back end of our YouTube channel. And so, as part of my non-clinical duties. And so
Same.
Right. And so I think, just kind of, we've got a couple of, cool projects sort of wrapping up, and just writing more content, writing more educational content about exercise, nutrition, seeing if I can kind of pare that down for the general population, because I know that, our YouTube channel and our fitness space is a very small subset of the population, recreational athletes. I want to try and find other ways in which I can, draw the general population and get them excited about fitness that's not judgmental, doesn't seem like overly taxing. There are ways in which you can incorporate fitness into your life without having it take on your entire life. You don't have to be a fitness influencer to be fit.
Sure. I feel like I should have asked you this question earlier, but do you think going through your life as someone who struggled with their weight and had weight as a primary concern, did you ever feel the medical community was fatphobic directly to you? Or do you feel like the medical community in your education taught you to be fatphobic to patients?
I don't know if it was necessarily fat phobic. I just, the medical community, the things that I had learned about nutrition just seemed to be so kind of not taking the long-term approach. There were a lot of times where it was just very much just the weight loss. I didn't really feel like I experienced it directly. Everybody seemed, can't really think of an instance where I felt targeted personally for my weight. But there
was never a situation where you came in to see your doctor for a symptom and they brushed it off as a weight-related issue, where in reality you had something more serious going on?
No, not particularly. The biggest thing I had in as a resident was I had sort of a knee issue, and they didn't brush, like, it was not weight related. It was, just sometimes stuff happens when you're lifting heavy weights.
Yeah, exactly.
In powerlifting. Yeah. And so, they were always pretty supportive about it. But like the kind of, when we talked about nutrition, again, it was very much, lean animal sources of protein were not really, like, they were kind of poo-pooed upon. It was very much the whole foods plant-based, which, I like the idea of eating more plants. I think it's really important for fiber. But if you, not all animal sources are terrible. You can eat eggs, you can eat,
sure. It's a pendulum, right? Yeah. Everyone's swinging. And it also depends what you're talking about. Like, in the American Standard Diet, please, let's get more plants in there.
Yes.
We're eating almost zero, except maybe the little fake slice of lettuce that's in our burgers,
right?
If it's even there. I feel like there's a book here.
Oh.
No? You disagree? Like some kind of food noise titled book talking about your journey? Because it's a pretty unique journey you've been on, in the sense of what you've experienced with both your mental and physical health, but also the fact that you're on the other end, also taking care of other people's mental and physical health. And now you're also married to an individual who's hyper-focused on physical and mental health. So I feel like this is a very unique vantage point you have.
Oh, I guess I was just so busy thinking about other projects going on that I hadn't quite stopped to think about it until now.
Well, perhaps maybe we could plant the seed in this non-plant focused diet. All right, I'm giving you a magic wand. Final question.
Okay.
You could fix one thing in healthcare, only one thing, and it instantly gets fixed. But it has to be specific, not just make everyone healthy, because that would be beautiful, but not realistic, even in my magical experiment.
Yeah.
So I give you the magic wand. What are you fixing?
Price transparency and insurance. Get rid of insurance.
Get rid of insurance like single payer?
Yeah, all of it.
Wow. Okay. So government funds it.
Actually, no, I take that back. Get the government out of insurance.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
So then who's paying for the insurance?
So here's and this is the reason why I'm like, yeah, just do, if I had a wand. A lot of times, I find myself, having to go to bat for my patients, and still the copays are terrible. To the point where a lot of times I've advised my patients, like, just pretend you don't have insurance, because the self-pay price is so much cheaper in certain instances.
Yeah,
but
in pharmaceuticals, that happens quite often.
Right.
Well, not often, but happens.
And enough times that I'm like, gosh, why are we here? I understand that there's probably a purpose in there somewhere, but that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that's a government issue.
I know.
I think
it's a little more complex than that.
No, it's probably more pharma issue and lack of government regulation in the pharma space, because I just had the head of or the former head of CMS on, and hearing the fact that they have such an inability to negotiate certain parts of drug prices, condition prices. I'm like, oh my God. So these people are just getting away with charging whatever they want. And it shows that without oversight, the capitalistic nature can really take advantage of healthcare. Because I'm not anti-capitalist by any means, but the capitalist model within healthcare technically breaks healthcare. Because if you're someone who needs insulin, as a capitalist, you say, well, charge as much as the market will allow. Well, if I need the insulin to stay alive, I'll pay every dollar I have, because otherwise I die.
Yeah.
You can really get away with robbing people. So that's where the government interventions need to step in and say, okay, it's capitalist, but it needs to be government regulated to some degree.
Whatever causes the self-pay price to be cheaper than, or different than some of the other, like if you're covered by insurance and they can't give you a clear answer.
I think that's the PBM world. It's really toxic.
Whatever that is, I would like to.
I would fix that as well. Let's ban PBMs. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and your transparency on everything. I think it's a powerful story that people will resonate with. I think you'll make an impact in their lives, because there are people who are judgmental against them taking certain medications. There are folks who are embarrassed to take certain medications, whereas there's all sorts of things that break in our bodies. 1 in 3 males will have incontinence after the age of 40, and that's okay to talk about.
Right.
So I'm glad we're airing all these conversations out. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, and before we wrap, where do you want people to go to follow along your journey?
I'm on Instagram only. I try and stay away from TikTok. It's a little too new for me. So Dr. Christle, Christle.
Cool. All right. We'll be following along and tracking the progress to see what that book is going to look like. And some patients make a lot of fitness mistakes. Click here to check that out. And as always, stay happy and healthy.